Hello guys, Dr. Whatever you name me now here, and today I want to make a new list of 16 operators that, in my opinion, you should build for IS5. So obviously you will find some recurrent operators that were already there in my previous video, so this one will be only for 4 stars and 5 stars. I will probably make another one for 6 stars later. So again, there will be 2 operators of each class, one for 4 stars and one for 5 stars, and this time I will also introduce a quote-unquote build urgency level going from 1 to 5 stars. 5 stars is you should absolutely build this operator for IS5, and 1 star is I had to put an operator there, so probably don't build it as there are much better options in other rarities or other classes. So let's start. For guards, the 5 star I would advise to upgrade this time is La Pluma, and for 4 star it would actually be Utage. I think La Pluma is a good problem solver for a lot of maps on IS5. There's a lot of maps where you have an extreme amount of enemies, particularly enemies that increase your block count, and that's something La Pluma absolutely loves. She loves having a lot of block count, she loves hitting a lot of enemies at the same time. Not only that, but there's also that one hand that makes her ignore 70% defense, which is unbelievably powerful on her. She probably won't be a boss killer, but she will absolutely help you throughout the whole run, and for this I really think she deserves the place of best 5-star guard for IS5. Utage has one specific use in IS5. She's one of the best 4 stars to destroy the crystals. You just deploy her, let her attack the crystals with her arts damage, and then retreat her. The best thing about Utage is that even when she gets necrosis, she will still deal damage because her skill is already active. Better yet, the damage over time she will take will actually help her deal more damage. It's actually not rare that I recruit Utage as a starter even. I just think she's that good. She also quote-unquote benefits from the hand I just previously mentioned. It's just that since this hand lets you ignore defense, you have to wait for Utage to finish a skill. So it's not that practical, but it can have some surprising uses sometimes. Some other operators I want to mention are Flint, who benefits from the same hand from La Pluma and Utage, but Flint is more apt at dealing with bosses. There's been a lot of cases where I recruited Flint last, and she demolished bosses thanks to this hand in particular. For 4 stars, you can also recruit Hummus and Cutter. Hummus is basically La Pluma, but a bit worse. In Cutter, even though she's less good in IS5 than in previous IS, she's still perfectly usable. It's just that a lot of her utility at destroying drones is not there anymore, because there's not a lot of drones in IS5, weirdly enough. So you can still recruit her, just know that she will not perform as well as in IS4 or IS3. For Vanguard, I would advise Canterbury and Beanstalk. I don't think Canterbury is that much of a priority. Still, there's some stages where being able to redeploy an operator can be very important, and if that operator can also net you some DP, then it's even better. So Canterbury is actually one of the best ones to do this job. I chose Beanstalk over Myrtle because I feel like there's a lot of stages where having a summon or having someone that can bait an attack, particularly in the early game, is actually pretty important, and that's not something a Myrtle can do. Myrtle is probably better in the late game, but usually in the late game you should have accumulated a lot of relics and you should be destroying the game by this point. Usually if you choke a run, it will happen in the early game, and Beanstalk in the early game is much better than Myrtle in my opinion. For other Vanguards you can upgrade, there's still Black Knight, who can deal some decent damage to the crystals thanks to a beast, and also deal some AoE damage, which can be actually pretty relevant sometimes. And of course there's Myrtle, I don't really need to explain why. For casters, I won't be cheating this time. I won't tell you to upgrade your Amia, because let's be honest, you won't be using Amia for her caster form. So instead, I will advise you to upgrade Minimalist and Click. Minimalist is really low on the priority list. It's just that I feel like Mecha Card casters in IS5 are extremely powerful thanks to Hand of Undulation, for example, and Minimalist is actually one of the operators that benefits the most from Hand of Undulation, because he can absolutely spam his S2, so that means he also benefits from spinach-like items and can actually reach some really high damage. It's just that the 4 star I want to mention, Click, is basically Minimalist but with an added stun, more range, cost less to deploy, cost less to upgrade, so if you want to upgrade a caster, you should probably upgrade Click instead. Indigo is also an option. The root can be extremely powerful, she can demolish the crystal just like Click can, so I would advise to upgrade Click or Indigo, or even both if you don't want to upgrade Minimalist, which you probably shouldn't. In the same vein, I can also mention Rock, who, like Minimalist and Click, is also a Mecha Cut caster, but if you're a new player, Minimalist is probably much easier to acquire than Rock, and I also feel like he's better in the early game than Rock, even though Rock is better in the late game. For snipers, I would advise Grey Altar and Embryo. Grey Altar is extremely good in IS5. Again, it's thanks to that one relic that really makes him good, and the added slow also adds to the utility. Embriel is an odd case, because you really have to play her in order to understand how powerful she is in IS5. First of all, you may think, yeah, but won't Embriel target the crystals every time, which would reduce her overall DPS? And you would be wrong thinking about this, because these crystals are extremely tanky, and Embriel targets the lowest defense enemies, meaning that whenever she activates her S2, even though she has global range and therefore should attack the crystals because they have increased aggro, she will actually attack enemies, and so she will only attack the crystal when there's no more enemies on the map, which in my opinion is extremely good. On top of that, she's very powerful at dealing with any 3 of the current bosses and benefits so much from increased attack or increased attack speed. There's a lot of tricks to Embriel that I will probably let you discover by yourself. Just know that she's absolutely worth upgrading for IS5. Other units I want to mention are Tolifons. As you have noticed, IS5 mainly revolves around the Sarkis theme, and Tolifons is very good at dealing with Sarkis. It's not rare to recruit Tolifons and see 4k or 5k damage dealt even on floor 2, so she can be very useful if you lack some good burst damage. Pinecone is also a very good option. Again, there's a lot of stages where you actually want some form of AoE damage because there's a lot of enemies swarming at you, and Pinecone is one of the best units to do this job. And since I mentioned Pinecone to already be good for IS3 and IS4, then you won't have to think to yourself, oh, but is she only good for this IS? No, she's good overall. Finally, another unit is Totter. It's basically for the same reason as Pinecone, it's just that even though he attacks multiple targets, he doesn't have true AoE, he deals less damage, but at the same time he costs less to deploy and his range can be more advantageous, so you can absolutely use him if you want to. I can also mention Blue Poison that I've tried a bit lately, and I actually think she's pretty fine for one specific reason. Her S1 deals mixed damage thanks to her talent and will target one additional target, which means she can both attack the crystals and deal damage to another target, which is actually pretty good in IS5. It's pretty much the same reason why I would also mention Totter or La Pluma. One very last unit I want to mention is Acid Drop. Acid Drop deals a fraction of her attack with every auto attack, which can be very useful in an early run if you're simply looking for someone to destroy the crystals, kind of like Blue Poison, except with no mixed damage. For supporters, I would advise Shamare and Deep Cutter. There's a lot less stat increase in IS5, so I don't think Shamare is as important as she was before. Still, she doesn't have that much competition among the 5-star supporters. I do think you could absolutely upgrade her to deal with some specific tanky units or some specific tanky bosses, but she's not that much of a priority in IS5. Deep Cutter, on the other hand, is absolutely a priority. As I mentioned with Beanstalk, I feel like having summons in IS5, particularly for floor 2, is extremely important, and Deep Cutter is one of the best units for this. You can use her summons for so many things. You can use her to tank Sarkis lances, you can use her to tank the binding shamans, you can use her to push enemies in holes, you can also use her against special enemies, for example against the bear or against the dog to buy some precious seconds. So yeah, I do believe Deep Cutter in IS5 particularly is very good. Other units I want to mention are Heidi, Scene, Podenko and Roberta. Heidi is still one of those buffers that can be used with some specific units. For example, if you want to buff a Golden Glow in the distance or an Embriel in the distance or the future Lapland Altar in the distance, you can absolutely pick Heidi as a last unit to do that. Scene is basically overpriced Deep Cutter. I wouldn't advise to upgrade Scene solely for IS5. In my opinion, you should stick with Deep Cutter. Still, she can absolutely be used. Podenko can actually deal some very high damage to the crystals, and her S1 can also be used as a tool to counter the Epoch that deals 70% damage to you on deployment, so she can be a very tech tool in the early game. Finally, Roberta can be used in some very specific situations where you absolutely want to tank some hard-hitting hits, for example against the regular Patriot or against the first boss. On top of that, she's the only 4-star supporters that has 2 block, which can be actually relevant, particularly in the early game, so I still think it was worth mentioning her. For specialist, you should upgrade Tin Man and Ethan. I don't really think I need to talk about Tin Man that much. He was literally made for IS5, he costs less hope to recruit, his skills are good, he increases the toy limit, so yeah, he's one of the best units for IS5 period, and on top of that, he's free. For Ethan, I won't talk that much about him. I will let another doctor tell you what needs to be said about him.
It's Ethan, it's always gonna be Ethan. Why bother blocking when you can just bind stuff forever?
For other units, I would probably advise Robin and Jay. As a Trap Master Specialist, Robin has some uses in IS5 in my opinion. She's basically Ethan but less good in most cases because she doesn't bind in AoE. Still, she benefits from Foul Beast, she can hit the few area aerial enemies there are in this mode. She doesn't need to be in the range to root enemies, unlike Ethan, which can be relevant against some bosses that could deal range damage against her. So yeah, she can be used for sure. Jay has always been that tech solution when you need both damage and healing and some block. For medics, this is where I would absolutely advise to upgrade Amiya, and for 4-star, I would tell you to upgrade Perfumer. Amiya is absolutely ridiculous in her medic form for IS5. Telling everything she can do would be a waste of time because there's so many things she can actually do. She can heal the birds with her passive healing, she can heal your summons with her passive healing, she can deal high damage, she benefits from Civilite Eterna, she benefits from spinach-like items, her range is actually pretty high. The only issue for a new player is that you actually have to finish chapter 14, which is actually pretty far in the game. Still, she's more than worth it, trust me. For 4-star, well, the issue is there's not a lot of 4-stars with a lot of utility, so I decided to go with Perfumer. I think the global range on Perfumer can be actually pretty relevant. There's a lot of maps where you need to spread out your units a lot, so Perfumer can actually be pretty relevant for those maps, but you can also recruit any other unit among Mulberry, Honeyberry, or Susuro. Mulberry and Honeyberry can heal corrosion damage. Weirdly enough, I don't think that it's that good in IS5. You should actually learn how to deal with corrosion damage without having to heal it. Still, they absolutely can be used, and Susuro is another direct option for Perfumer. She doesn't have the global heal, but she has more healing overall on a single target. So if you have already upgraded Susuro or not Perfumer, that's absolutely fine. You can switch them and there's no issue with this whatsoever. Finally, for defenders, the 5-star defender I would advise to upgrade is nobody, but if you absolutely want to upgrade one, I would say it's probably Fire Whistle. And for the 4-star, on the contrary, you should absolutely upgrade Gummy. Fire Whistle is, in my opinion, still a cope option. You generally don't want to recruit a 5-star defender in IS. Fire Whistle is probably one of those exceptions because she can deal AoE damage, which can be somewhat relevant. Asbestos pretty much works the same way, so you can switch Fire Whistle for Asbestos if you want to, but I wouldn't advise to upgrade either of them. Gummy, on the other hand, is absolutely fantastic in IS5. She deals actually some high damage. The heals she provides, particularly in the early game, to deal with the Epoch that deals 70% damage on deployment is fantastic. The stun she has with every auto attack can be used to interrupt the mage's chance that would otherwise inflict necrosis on you. There's a lot of uses to Gummy in IS5. I truly believe she's the best defender, probably even among 6-stars, so absolutely upgrade her. And there you have it, guys. This is my current list of 5 and 4 stars you should upgrade for IS5. Again, I haven't gotten all the endings on all squads yet, so this may change in the future, but from what I've experienced so far, these seem to be the best units I've tested. So thank you for watching and see you in the next video.